Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Monday, November 13th. Updated OBS to version 30.0.0, I believe is the newest version. Big changes there with a big major number change, I'm sure. Although, maybe not that big of a changes. But yeah, I can definitely see there's some things that are at least somewhat changed. Starting late today because once again I was really just awake and then asleep and awake and asleep all over today. Just I would wake up and then like at 1 in the afternoon, which is still too late in the first place, and then I would just run to the bathroom and then immediately fall asleep, and I did that like 3 or 4 times. Like hypersomnia, insomnia problems there, certainly. Yeah, and as far as the accountability section, I'll make it short and sweet in that I mostly spent the weekend, on top of doing a little bit of Lego, trying to work on just the my smart online, smart on air sign. I'm still not getting the name correct. Help and installation instructions. Just typing that up. And I'm still not even really at the point where I've done the rough draft to let ChatGPT try and write it better. It's definitely not in my wheelhouse per se. I may also get a phone call in the middle of the stream and have to mute. We'll see if that happens or not. But yeah, it definitely is in my wheelhouse to write just normal text. Like, it's maybe a bit of a stereotype, but I think there is probably a little bit of truth to it, that if you are more of a technical writer, a right brain or left brain type person, weird, we have just one new protector for purchase. But yeah, if you're more of a technical writer, then you're probably not going to be particularly good at writing more from a creative side or interacting with humans with emotions, which would, I definitely put that more as a creative writing style. And yeah, it's just something that I'm not really good at all. And ChatGPT is one trick that I've learned recently how to use, and another trick is to have a speech to text app, not text to speech, on my phone, where I could just ramble and talk to the phone and have it turn into text, which I wasn't using. Otherwise, I'm just watching some streaming stuff and really have gotten far too much into weekly released new series TV, the old-fashioned way of watching TV, which is a nightmare. And even at that, I've kind of saturated everything and seen most of everything, to the point where I started watching Lex, L-E-X-X, which is an old Canadian sci-fi series that leaned heavily on being raunchy and lewd, and although I'm 3/4 of the first 4 pilot season movies, which really they are so long, and the first couple of them really do the same thing over and over again. They'll say the exact same lines of dialogue and repeat it. They're really stretching for time, which is funny because they're also spending a lot of budget on stop animation and CGI and things like that. And for the time, that would have been a lot of work and a lot of expense. When I thought about Lex, I would have remembered it as a very cheaply made, this is something we're going to throw on after late night, and it was just a chintzy like joke parody of something like, I guess, Ritual Festival is ready to go. Red Dwarf, if raunchier, or a parody of like Star Trek, if you, it's not really that much of a parody of Star Trek, but actually, at least in those first pilot videos I've seen, there's actually quite a lot of costumes, a decent amount of people who later on were would be famous niche actors. For instance, the very first of the pilot movies, which is what I would call them because there's 4 of them, but they call it the first season. Like the very first episode of the first season has a character named Thoden. That the actor playing Thoden is actually the same actor who played Brad in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And it's really only either the next episode or the episode after that you have Tim Curry showing up, playing a character. And very recognizable, playing a character. I think you could generally describe him as the poet character. And yeah, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing with this ritual summon thing, but I bet we probably want to discard that in favor of adding one of these and one of these. Although, honestly, if this is a ritual, I should have taken the blue thing, shouldn't I? Yeah, I'm gonna have to learn the special rules for each ritual summon for each deck to probably get the daily quest done, so this is gonna be a particularly difficult event, I imagine. There's actually kind of a striking, at least in the first 3 episodes, striking lack of actual nudity. There is one shower scene that it would have easily been cut out when it was airing on the Sci-Fi Channel, where I saw it. But yeah, you would kind of get the idea that you would be seeing a lot of that, but really there isn't. There's guys in G-string thongs in like the 4th episode, which I'm only halfway through watching. I guess I have to just end here, don't I? But yeah, by modern standards, it wouldn't be PG-13, but it also would be laughable compared to something like Game of Thrones, which, yeah, of course, this is decades difference too. But even at that point, I imagine Lex would have been right at home on Showtime or Skinamax or whatever. One of those premium channels. Yeah. It wasn't well enough known as a series to really even cause controversy and benefit from controversy. Yeah, it does really have a Red Dwarf feel in the sense that it is just a lower budget sci-fi, something closer to the old Doctor Who things, which we just really don't get that, and inherently it would be rough to make a show that was a lower budget sci-fi show these days. But we might get a few more sci-fi things if sci-fi is what people even really want. And according to at least one survey, it seems like the new Generation Z people don't want romance or sex in regular shows at all, so they're those kinds of shows, I think, very much will become split off, become their own separate thing. Even things like Game of Thrones, like even when Game of Thrones was coming out, I think there was a decent amount of people who said, hey, if they just toned down the nudity and sex in Game of Thrones, a lot more people would stick with it and would be interested in it. Nobody really concerns themselves about violence and gore. But yeah, it's really, really hard to suggest watching Lex, though. It's fairly long-running series, fairly low budget. If you don't have nostalgic for it, it's not really going to work. I mentioned Red Dwarf, the actors who played Dave Lister and the, I think, female computer, or maybe Cassandra, the female love interest for a brief time in Red Dwarf, also show up in Lex. Weirdly, the creator of Lex went on to make a kids show that was called something like Zex, Z-E-X-X, which seems like you are definitely making a poor choice there. And also, that's a very unknown. I've never seen it or heard of it as far as an animated series, so it probably failed. I'm doing things here, but I'm almost certainly not doing the right things. Of course, it's not like these guys are blowing me away in one turn. I also watched the movie The Haunting of the Queen Mary on Hulu, and that was awful. Just an absolute awful movie. It felt very much like they were putting two movies together, and as such, they were struggling to make one good movie, because half of The Haunting of Queen Mary happens in the present day, half of it happens in flashbacks. The flashback section itself probably should have been the part that was focused on. In the present day, you see a lot of ghosts haunting this Queen Mary ship, but unless it was explained at the very, very beginning of the game and I wasn't paying attention, like, there was just constantly this confusion as to why there were that many ghosts on the ship. I didn't ritual summon once there, but whatever. Because, yeah, in the flashbacks, you see a person become possessed and kill about 6 to 10 people with an axe, which would be fine. You could have even a giant luxury class ship, like something like the Titanic, with 6 to 10 ghosts, and then it could be like 13 ghosts in the movie, and that each of those ghosts is unique and it's getting a backstory, and that each one of them shows some level of threat. That would work perfectly fine. But instead what they did is they had what felt like hundreds of ghosts on the ship from different times, from different events. At one point they're showing off like Nazis being on the ship, and I just don't get why there would be ghosts of Nazis in Nazi uniforms on either US or British ship. Unless, and again, that would just, it would make sense if there was some backstory to it, but they almost would have had to focused on the backstory completely. There is one main bad guy that's working to make sure the ghosts can't possess people and leave the ship, but then there's not quite enough of an explanation as to why that matters. Like, why you would need to keep the ghosts on the ship, particularly if you have a whole bunch of them, since in the present day all they're doing with the ship is telling ghost stories, which you can tell the ghost stories perfectly fine without actually keeping the ghosts there. There is one specific person, basically, that they can't allow to escape. But in the future, he's not really trying to escape either from the ship, or the ship would magically fall apart. But that's just like one ghost. There's no need for the other ghosts to be kept. And they don't even really characterize the one ghost that has to stay as being so obsessed with keeping the others around. It almost feels like it should be a vast conspiracy that the ghosts have to be kept on the ship, otherwise they would just wander the world and cause trouble. The movie, the one thing... Whoops. I hope this doesn't do something terrible, but it looks like it is. That was a mistake. Like, the one concept that I liked about The Haunting of Queen Mary was the idea of a foundation sacrifice. That's something you could certainly have seen be part of the Supernatural series, that there were just boats and buildings that had people sacrificed and built into the foundation of the buildings, which I wouldn't be surprised if there is actually some truth to that. But yeah, that would be a way to investigate old buildings and old boats and things, and look for specific ghosts, or explain haunted houses where the entire houses are twisting and changing. But yeah, that's about the only thing that was interesting there. The movie itself had way too many weird Dutch angles and no jump scares to really mention, if you probably need a few of those. Yeah. I imagine there's a lot of movies like that on streaming services that are just not particularly great, but heck, you're getting it for free with the streaming service anyway, so I could see people watching them. And particularly when you're talking about horror movies, which why am I talking about horror movies? There's probably not a significant amount of people that really want the truly scariest of scary stories, and it's far more popular to have something that is only slightly spooky. I also watched the most recent Goosebumps Hulu series episode, which they're kind of stretching it. It definitely feels like the story should have ended in the last episode, and then they got some extra episodes, extra budget, which is fine, but perhaps what they should have done is moved the story to a different location or jumped the story ahead a year or two instead of just a couple days ahead. It is definitely working fairly well, but it is also going to be difficult to squish the childish Goosebumps ideas like Say Cheese or Die into a more realistic teen drama with teenagers in high school having relationship drama between each other, which is something you would just never have seen in any of the other Goosebumps stories. There might be a little bit of relationship drama, but it would be kids in junior high, just barely in junior high, in elementary school. And they're making Goosebumps far too serious for what it really is. Although in all fairness, this most recent Goosebumps series is still way better than R.L. Stein's Zombie Town movie, which that was just absolutely awful. Let's see, do I have any other pointless opinions to spout off? Not really. Still playing all the games on my phone, and the video game nominations happened, and it seems to me like over the weekend, in part because of that, possibly, Video Games Chronicle did not put out any articles. Either that or my macro just messed up completely, so we'll get through the news, I guess, a little bit faster. And it'll just be a matter of how much I really want to put up with this. But we do have a GameDeveloper.com article. Nick Poole has been named the CEO of the UK video games trade body UKIE. Poole said he's joining UKIE to help the game industry secure the recognition and investment it deserves. He is kind of a great example of why you don't want an open collar on a collared shirt. This guy has a fairly thick neck. I'll be generous about that, and it only gets highlighted more because of this. If you have a collared shirt, you really should have it buttoned up to the top button always. Like a tie in this case would probably also point downward and take more attention away from a fairly, again, thick, generous face. It's kind of a weird haircut with a skunk mark. Hopefully that's not being dyed. And yeah, I won't speculate, but there's definitely some feminine features in his face, assuming he is a he. Let's see if we can do something here. Send this to the graveyard. Probably a good move. Guess we're trying to summon this Blue Eyes Chaos Dragon. this could summon that blue eyes white dragon, but we probably want to do this first. So what we probably want is this, and then this, and then we'll just win because the guy disconnects or surrenders. This may be one of those events where people just surrender. And at a certain level, if I can get this just like all the way to the end quickly, more is the better. Honestly, I really only would want to target getting up to 1100, about 10 times of what we're at now, to get these 300 gems. While it is nice to have some extra legacy pack tickets, they're not worth that much. We definitely want to get to 5500 to get a field parked that may not be accessible any other way. And as long as we're winning, there's really no reason to move to the other decks. We should try the other decks, but yeah, I guess we'll show it off and we'll try, and we may find that the other decks are more difficult, or actually less difficult. They seem to be labeled as being more difficult, but that might be not true from my level of understanding. So yeah, OBS, I said, has version 30.0 out, with new, easier to read status bar, WHIP/web RTC output, which I'm not really sure what this is, but I don't think this is potentially a complete replacement for a WebSocket. I think this is more for streaming video out, where the control codes on WebSocket to change how OBS is performing or switch scenes or things like that may not be included in that. I would really hate to have to change all of my code on my smart on-air sign, but I almost would lean into the idea of maybe getting away from WebSockets and trying a different API code standard, just because of how poorly I think the WebSocket code really is supported and written. But that would mean significant delays and continuously spending even more time coding instead of making content. Intel encoder support for Linux. Application audio capture is going to be a new thing, certainly. That means no longer having to install intermediate software such as the banana software to potentially separate out different applications audio going to your headphones versus different audio going to the recording software of OBS. Now you can just say always capture this specific application's audio and only this specific application's audio. In my example, that would be capture Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel's audio, but don't capture Firefox's audio. So I could play a video and hear the trailer on the video without risking having the audio of a trailer get copyright claimed on YouTube. Or I could hear something else. In my case, when the auto blur is enabled, I hear music playing as a way of reminding me that the auto blur is on without having to look at the screen in the previous screen and see that the blur is on. Which, that's another thing that honestly, actually, in that case, wouldn't have anything to do with application audio capture, but it works in those same systems. New virtual camera for macOS 13 Plus and a safe mode crash recovery. Now, what's funny here is RTMP is yet another video streaming software standard. So if WebRTC and WIP are a standard, RTMP is another standard, which is very believable because honestly there are several standards. OnVIF is another standard for security cameras, in particular ONVIF, I believe, And with that standard, there's there are several different devices like smart cameras or just cameras in general, security cameras in general, that all have their own different standards competing against each other, and it would be very nice if OBS supported all of that. There really isn't as easy of a software that I've learned how to use yet that would let you potentially take video from like security camera feeds. Like, I have no reason to really do this project, but I would really love to see a project where you took a college that had hundreds upon hundreds of rooms and you had security cameras in there that could also be used and switched over, and the streams could be sent also to the teacher's laptop to stream it for online learning and to let the teacher use that footage in any other way that they would want to. Of course, that inherently assumes the teacher would know how to use OBS or any kind of other recording software, and that's unlikely to happen easily. But there is this weird duplication right now where in a college, if you wanted to stream a lecture for online learning or just record it for your own records, you're not going to be able to use the security cameras that probably should be always recording and streaming in the room, assuming there are security cameras in the room. You're going to have to bring out yet another camera, and cameras are expensive, and when cameras are expensive, then you end up splitting the difference in the technology, where instead of having like one really high quality camera with pan, tilt, zoom features that you might want for security reasons, or for lecture reasons, really, you'd want more high quality. In the security, you can be fairly low quality, and most people don't care. But then you end up splitting the cost of those two cameras, and then you got two lower quality cameras. Like, theoretically, the best way to do this, and I've never had an iPhone, so I've never really experimented with this, but theoretically, the best thing to do would be to take a relatively new iPhone and plug it into a laptop and use it as a camera. You can probably get a decent amount of video out of that, assuming you can get video out of it at all, which is a big assumption. It may very well be the case that there is no way, no software, no app, or no access through Apple to allow you to select the video going out via a lightning plug or a USB-C plug to a computer or a MacBook or whatever. So yeah, that's basically what I said. Is there's a lot of changes here, but a lot of these also are not likely to change your day-to-day experience. Version 30 certainly could have a lot more changes. You could have completely breaking changes where your old scenes, your old transitions just don't work. And jumping me to the battle phase here somehow. I can't do anything, so switch to main phase 2, I guess. They go on further to say notable bug fixes include several crashes, video capture devices should no longer drop frames if buffered, window capture no longer shows the last captured frame in some situations, auto config fix-ups, minor hotkey saving and updating fixes, group improvements, and plenty more. Also, they're thankful to their dedicated community of developers, testers, and support volunteers who help them make the project possible. if you'd like to support the project, you can find us both on Patreon and Open Collective. I've never heard of Open Collective. And noticeably, this is the first thing they posted in nearly a month, November 11th, since October 10th, which is perfectly fine for something like OBS. If they don't have anything to say, they shouldn't bother trying to tweet. Where you see YouTube Gaming doing the exact opposite and constantly trying to put out tweets. I saw a story talking about how Gen Z people are also increasingly uninterested in diamonds, in particular, which is a good thing. Like the only reason you should be interested in diamonds is if you're making like high level equipment, record player, needles, things like that. Need diamonds too, but if you're trying to put it on bling, you're just wasting a limited resource. Alright, let's switch over to this deck and this loner deck and just see if that feels any different. That being said, companies like Tiffany's really only get coverage is if they release something fairly ridiculous, and they're only going to get coverage from video game companies is if they release something ridiculous that's video game related. So we have this Video Games Chronicle article here saying that Tiffany & Co. is releasing a line of Pokemon jewelry costing up to $29,000, which this gold pendant definitely does not feel like $29,000 worth of jewelry by any means. I imagine Tiffany & Co. has a major markup, and while the case may be a couple extra $100 in my book, that would be about as much as I would say a Pokeball case is worth. The small Pikachu costs $9,900, and here they've really gone out of their way to just put diamonds in random places, which those tiny little diamonds are not really what people want anyways. Like the scale is going to be something here, but let's just assume that this fits in your hand very comfortably. That's, I imagine, 1/4 of an inch in size. And yeah, you've just got these really small diamonds being placed wherever they can find a place to put them, with no real logic or concept around it. And yeah, ideally people that do want diamonds want one big diamond with then several medium-sized diamonds to adjourn it, where these are basically the off-castings of diamond dust, nearly. And it just doesn't look good either. If you really, really love Pokemon, I still wouldn't think you would want to wear it, because it just doesn't look like Pokemon, nor does it look good. This is the kind of status symbol that would only really make sense if you're just have way too much money and way too little sense. GameDeveloper.com has an obituary here for Jim Southworth, Baldur's Gate 3's cinematic lead. In addition to Baldur's Gate 3, Southworth worked on such games as Medieval Resurrection, Blade 2, and Boundless. Which again, this is a great example of, since it takes like 4 years to work on a video game, that if you're relatively young, even if you're fairly old, which there aren't that many old people in the video game industry, you're really only going to have 4 to 8 games worth mentioning, at best 8 games, before you've passed away. It's just, it takes so long. And here we have an example of, this is probably a very simplistic corporate picture, a badge ID type picture. Definitely not to a level where I would like to do it if I was running a video game company. I would definitely have a photo day every couple of years or once a year, and just I'm gonna answer this. I'll be back in a second. Okay, I'm back. Apologies for that. And on top of that, I didn't even pause the recording, so I'm going to have to potentially come back and edit that all out. That was a much longer phone call than I expected it was going to be. Nothing super big of a problem, but it certainly went on way longer than I felt it needed to. Anyways, so yeah, we were talking about the news, and honestly, I probably am going to make this the last Yu-Gi-Oh game, just because I've gone so long and started late anyways. But yeah, we have an obituary here for Jim Southworth, Baldur's Gate 3 the cinematic passing away. I imagine, like most game developer obituaries, we're not gonna get much of an idea as to what he passed away from. He seems fairly young, but you know, these days that doesn't really mean much. People die of a lot of things. And certainly there are any number of ways you can die young, as in the same ways that you can die old. But yeah, it does seem like there's, unfortunately, GameDeveloper.com is still doing a really poor job, and I don't think any mainstream video game journalist is doing a great job of having obituaries pre-written for people. It kind of feels like the day you become an employee at a video game company, somebody like GameDeveloper.com should start making a profile for you and an obituary for you, and make it easy to convert what is generally just a profile about this is what he's done and this is who he is or who she is, into an obituary. And arguably, maybe that should fall onto the shoulders of game companies too, at a certain level, where a game company should potentially have a personnel file already. There should just be perhaps a way to have a public version of a personnel file that just has public information and not private information that would talk about the career. Best case scenario, you have people's resumes, if you can find their resumes on LinkedIn. But that's about it. And it really isn't worth the effort, for me in particular, to try and find somebody's resume and do a better obituary. Family members who just lost their loved ones obviously are not in a great position to start handing out press releases and obituaries. And that's where you might have a newspaper or a funeral home do it for you, and arguably that might be exploitative and expensive in a lot of cases, and it may just not be done particularly well. We do have a GameDeveloper.com article. There's a report here that Amazon has laid off 180 employees in its video games division. Like previous Amazon layoffs earlier this year, the company's newest cuts affect the Crown Channel and game growth teams in the game division. Now, arguably, in a lot of cases, I say good, and in this case, you certainly could make the argument good that Amazon's games division has failed really miserably to deliver on anything. But I would say in this case, they really haven't been given enough of a time and enough chances, in my opinion. And if I didn't say so about the previous layoffs, I should have. And now really wouldn't be the time to lay off employees unless they just really are 180 really bad employees, which maybe they are. I would say if you had laid off 180 employees at Twitch, it probably would be a case of saying good. Twitch has been given plenty of time to try and grow and stabilize itself and just be a better product, and it really hasn't done that. Whereas Amazon's game division really hasn't done anything as far as making games and releasing games. They have gotten the free with Prime games set up where it is a situation where the that you get a few free games with Prime on different services, but that free games with Prime or free game content, in-app content with Prime is just not really giving you anything special. And it's the same with the Epic Games Store too, is that there really just aren't that many special or good games that you even could get that you weren't expecting to play or would want to play. And then when you have the Epic Games Store and other stores like that already playing on that level and competing, that just creates a situation where there's already quite a lot of games everybody has. Just hoping that these cards are the cards I need, but I'm not certain if they are. If we reveal the special summon card, we could summon this. Which maybe that would have been the right move, is to do that. And then, interesting. Seems like I sacrificed his card. That there was a card that could do that. There was a ritual summon, and that was the reason why you wouldn't want to use these extra spots. But it occurred, frankly, so rare that it just wasn't that big of a deal in actual ranked gameplay. So, for the most part, I do have Video Games Chronicles Twitter here, and it does seem like they may have put out some news, and my macro just didn't work. Apparently, Remedy's free-to-play multiplayer project Vanguard has gone back to the concept phase. Baldur's Gate 3 and Alan Wake 2 lead the Game Awards nominations. Now, the Game Awards nominations are going to be another story we talk about, certainly, in that we have some interesting news around that. A couple of things I've seen so far without even really paying attention to it. Sony wants to patent the ability to launch games from specific points when streaming, allowing users to join the action at key moments without having to play through the rest of the title. Interesting. But yeah, it seems to me like the Game Awards have said no political statements amongst Israel and Palestine and Ukraine, and just in general people getting up on the stage and making political statements. Although inherently random people getting up on stage and making political statements are not going to be stopped by adding a rule to say you can't, presenters and award winners can't make political statements. This is clearly just a rule against not coming out and being pro-Ukrainian, pro-Russian, pro-Palestinian, pro-Israeli, whatever side somebody might choose. And I imagine they will be fairly lenient in SJW style political statements. If you came out and made a statement as far as pro Black Lives Matter or pro feminism, third wave feminism, that would almost certainly not fall in against political statements. it does make a lot of sense, frankly, for this rule to have existed from the beginning. If your award ceremony has nothing to do with politics, most people don't want political statements, or what would be described as political statements, to happen. It doesn't make things like the Oscars better when you have people making those kind of statements. People really do want the Oscars to be, for the most part, eventless and boring and dull. And yes, that makes them boring and dull, but it also doesn't. It keeps the focus on the movies at the Oscars. Whereas when you have a big event or some controversy like the Will Smith slap, can anybody mention any of the movies that have won that year when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock? No. Although in all fairness, most people don't remember the movies that would have won Oscars anyways. But particularly in the video game field, gamers do want to know who wins an award, and they want to discuss it and dispute it and argue about it way more than they want to talk about non-video game related stuff. We can see another Video Games Chronicle article. Rocksteady is launching a Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League video series this week. The first episode promises to unpack the story and gameplay of the heavily delayed title. So seems to me like they're trying to build time, buy some time. Modern Warfare 3 is on track to be the lowest rated Call of Duty ever based on critic and user scores. Definitely they're not happy with the launcher issue on Modern Warfare, and the point of having to exit out and see load screens to go back to the old Modern Warfare games because they have this weird unified launcher, as I understand it. Video Games Chronicle here, and maybe this is Twitter's fault, it's going in circles. Nintendo is going to set to present a Indie World stream tomorrow. They have a review here giving 4 stars to the PlayStation Portal out of 5, which I really don't care about their reviews. But yeah, we are really just going in circles. Hades is coming to iOS as a Netflix exclusive. Netflix has revealed the animated Witcher show Sirens of the Deep will star video game actor Doug Cockle as Geralt. So, yeah. I don't think that really means much to too many people these days, though. The fans of the Netflix Witcher series, I think, all, for the most part, jumped ship when you lost the one actor. In all fairness, though, I will say my personal experience with the Netflix Witcher live-action series was that I lost interest after 3 or 4 episodes. And so it was well before any other controversies happened that I had already lost interest in that. And at this point, I'm not even using Netflix, so I've just kind of lost interest completely with all their content. I do get notifications when they have new things to announce, but they really don't have that much new to announce. There's still a lot happening here that you have to do. I've only managed to ritual summon 2 out of 20 characters, and yeah, seems like we're gonna have to just duel 25 more times. Normal summon, special summon, activate traps, and spell cards, which when you're ritual summoning, you're going to do a lot of that anyways, so we're fairly close. I didn't even get any progress on this daily quest, but yeah, that's about as much as I want to play today. Let's see if there's anything else as far as Video Game Chronicles news that we really need to talk about. Warframe Studio Digital Extremes has confirmed a round of job cuts tied to the closure of its external project division. And then Modern Warfare 3 is being bundled with a slim version of the PS5. Sledgehammer Games has released a launch day patch for Modern Warfare 3 with detailed campaign fixes, multiplayer changes since last month's betas. Sega has collaborated with a university-based AI startup in Japan to create a tool that uses AI prompts to generate voxel monsters. I feel like that's a story we'd already talked about. And then Unity expects some layoffs. So I would assume that this November 10th was around Friday, and so we've already talked about most of these stories. Now the Super Mario Brothers movie coming to Netflix in the United States is probably going to be a bigger deal for Netflix, but yeah, Netflix also can't really have nothing interesting happen for 3 or 4 months and then one Mario movie fix everything. They need to kind of constantly have new content that's interesting to a wide variety of people with a wide variety of taste, and arguably they are getting worse and worse at that. Probably most streaming services are getting worse and worse at that. A newcomer, Rena, completes Tekken 8's launch roster. So this is the last Tekken 8 character being added. Rena, or Rena. I'd assume it's pronounced Rena. So, Baldur's Gate 3 and Alan Wake 2 lead the Game Awards in the 2023 nominations. I also saw that there was a YouTube stream of Q&As with the guy who runs the Game Awards. I don't know if it really is worth it to watch like a 40-minute Q&A though with him. Probably isn't going to answer anything to any real satisfactory level, or I'm not sure that many people really would have that many questions. So, just getting down to the list, you have Game of the War year, Alan Wake, Baldur's Gate 3, Marvel Spider-Man 2, Resident Evil 4, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which feels like this must have been released early in 2023 to actually have come out this year. Really early. Noticeably, Starfield, I don't believe, is in any of this list. Which, in all fairness, I don't think anybody can argue that that Starfield deserves to be in any of these lists. Mario Wonder and Tears of the Kingdom were made by Nintendo EPD, a subdivision of Nintendo. Important to point that out too. In the same way that Insomniac Games and Marvel Spider-Man 2 is a partially owned, if not wholly owned, subsidiary of Sony Interactive Entertainment. And I guess Epic Game Publishing is now the publisher for Alan Wake 2 and Remedy Entertainment. Best Game Direction goes to Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, nominations do at least, Spider-Man 2, Super Mario Bros., Legends of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Exact same list. It's almost same list for Best Narrative. Cyberpunk 27 gets added, Final Fantasy 16 gets added, and the 2 Nintendo games as far as narrative get removed, which maybe that's sending a bit of a message that the narrative in Nintendo games are lackluster, but in all fairness, they kind of should be since they're kids games for younger kids. Best Art Direction adds Hi-Fi Rush and Lies of P, and then returns the 2 Nintendo games while losing Cyberpunk and Baldur's Gate 3, which, okay. Then Best Score and Music has been combined apparently for Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Final Fantasy 16, Hi-Fi Rush, and Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. So not a big love, I guess, for Super Mario Bros. Wonder's music. Best Audio Design, Alan Wake 2, Dead Space Remake, getting some nod here. Probably not going to win. Hi-Fi Rush, Spider-Man 2, and Resident Evil 4. And you can pretty much tell from all of these listings that Alan Wake, Baldur's Gate 3, Spider-Man, Resident Evil 4 all have a high chance of winning at least one category. I wouldn't be surprised if it's fairly evenly split so that you aren't just giving all the awards to Alan Wake 2 or Baldur's Gate 3 or Spider-Man. the problem certainly with a lot of these awards is that Alan Wake 2 not really getting played that much by mainstream gamers before the awards happen, I imagine, compared to, say, Spider-Man 2, which will be played a lot more by gamers. Then they have best performances for different actors. One from Final Fantasy 16, Star Wars, Jedi Survivor, Cyberpunk, Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Marvel Spider-Man 2. And then they have innovation in accessibility categories for Diablo 4, Forza Motorsport, Hi-Fi Rush, Marvel Spider-Man 2, Mortal Kombat 1, and Street Fighter 6. And this feels like they may have just put some names in here just as a way of being nice, particularly in a category for innovation of accessibility. We kind of need an explanation, a longer sentence, as to what this innovation was, because I don't inherently know what innovations have been added to Street Fighter 6 or Mortal Kombat 1 to make them more accessible or not. Are they specifically talking about better subtitles or better player input, support for more controllers? How much of those supports for more controllers might get thrown out the window on Xbox in particular, when Xbox is just about to start banning a bunch of unsupported devices? Arguably, the same kind of description should probably be in Games for Impact, where we have quite a few games here. And let's see, how many of these do I really even recognize? I know the name Goodbye Volcano High, and the rest of these I very possibly am seeing for the first time. This Tachia I may have seen, but I couldn't tell you anything about it. Then I have Best Ongoing Game, which doesn't really mean too much, as ongoing games are, I think, fairly starting to die. And I did see a story, maybe we'll cover it today, where it seems like the Overwatch League may be shut down, and that may mean immediately that the Microsoft is going to spend, be charged $12 million to shut down this Overwatch League, and they're going to lose money. I very often describe the Activision Blizzard acquisition by Microsoft as being some kind of corporate protectionism, to bail out Activision Blizzard, and in particular the CEO Bobby Kotick. And if immediately they're losing $12 million that they promised to this league, if the league doesn't continue, that's a big bill. $12 million is probably a big bill even for Microsoft. It's not something you can just wave your hand away from. Best community support. Again, you really would have to be deep into these games to know how well the community is actually supporting it. There is a general feeling that Baldur's Gate 3 has good community support, but can you really make the same argument for Cyberpunk 2077? Yes, they eventually fixed their game, but is that supporting the community as much as just fixing a broken product? So what does it even really mean to say community support, and how is that slightly different from ongoing game? Because I could see an argument that like Destiny 2 might be a best ongoing game because they're just continuously adding more content, but it doesn't potentially have best community support because it's not actually that supportive of the community, which maybe Destiny 2 is, maybe it isn't, I don't know. Then best independent games are Cocoon, Dave the Diver, Dredge, Sea of Stars, and Viewfinder, all of which are more indie games, or obviously indie games, some of which I recognize. A few of these I do. And then best debut indie game is weird, because then doesn't that inherently mean that some of these winners here may not have been released in this year? Which, if you're going to start having categories for best debut, that is confusing. Now that I think about it a little bit more, it's probably not best debut as in some of these other indie games may have come out in 2022, which makes no sense. It means debut as in these are games that are the first releases from these developers. It's the company debuting, not the game debuting per se. But it is very much a case, I think, for them to double dip and highlight 2 indie games, which I guess I can't complain too much about that. In the same way that a best mobile game is a way for them to highlight 1 mobile game, well, although arguably it's going to be a struggle to say even 1 mobile game is worth an award. Honkai Star Rail probably would be my guess as to what should win, whereas Hello Kitty Adventure Island or Final Fantasy VII probably don't even merit, in my opinion, being there. Best VR and AR game as a category still feels a little weird, but at a certain level, I guess award shows can never really admit that VR and augmented reality games are just a no-go route, and that they can't just drop the category unless we get to the point where absolutely 0 VR and AR games are actually being released. Then they have a best action game. Oh, this is getting long as far as the title list, and I think at this point I probably would just say let's scroll down, and if you're more interested, check out this Video Games Chronicle article, which they have at least done the good thing here of making a good list instead of making it more difficult to read. But there's fighting game, family game, sim game, sports games. This all giving them a lot of opportunity to give more awards. Of course, the biggest problem here is how prestigious is the Video Game Awards, because it really isn't that prestigious in my book. It's nice to have an award show, certainly, but it does feel like it is very much like the Oscars, where it doesn't really matter and it doesn't lead to anything. Maybe you put the award on your second printing of your case and say, hey, this won a video game award, but how many people are really flipping over a video game disc case in a store, looking at the back, saying, oh, this won an award, thus I'm going to buy that game? I think the number is going to be very, very small. Or if you're going to Steam and you're seeing that a game won a video game award, does that really influence whether you purchase the game or not? And yeah. That definitely doesn't seem like a good idea. You do have a category here for best adaptation, where they're turning video games into TV, and I am not super happy with that idea. That being said, it is also kind of silly to not mention the Super Mario Brothers movie, which almost certainly would win here, although you may have a little bit of competition here. But it certainly does start to make an argument that we're going to see more and more categories in the future as far as a best adaptation of a action game, best adaptation of a fighting game, and we might see 4 or 5 awards going to TV and movie producers instead of video game developers, stealing away the prestige and the potential prestige and the attention away from actual game developers. And I definitely don't want to see Randy Pitchford on the stage of the Game Awards at some point in the future getting an award for best adaptation of Borderlands the movie, which, yeah, that may happen. Then most anticipated game as a category is a hard one to even figure out how you would vote for that. It is just going to come down to the judge's own personal excitement, unless you're going to do a survey of gamers and ask them what game they're most anticipated with. But even if you're going to do that, then how do you nominate a game? This is one of those categories where it would be better to say, we have a survey going on right now and we will announce the most anticipated game winner from that survey live on stage, but it includes all games and you can just fill in anything. And obviously you might have some meme joke games winning there and manipulation happening, but it's one way you could at least integrate the audience more instead of the Video Game Awards really feeling like it is just an elite collection of judges giving awards, very possibly other game developers giving themselves awards. And then you have Content Creator of the Year, which again probably should be a public vote on that. I couldn't name any of these people. Like, maybe if I saw one of them I might recognize them, but yeah. And then Best Esports Game, again, like VR and AR esports, feels like it's more dying than anything. Best Esports Athlete makes sense, or Best Esports Team. Giving an award to a coach is weird, and Best Esports Events. Now, you've got like 5 awards here as they were promoting esports, and it definitely doesn't feel like 5 awards should be given out around esports. And some of that may have to do with just the pandemic. If the pandemic was completely over everywhere in the world and esports were back in a big way, maybe then I could see the argument of going back to giving 5 awards to esports. But right now, this year in particular, I don't think esports has been a big deal. See, this was a person who was retweeted. Let's see if I can find this tweet. Yeah, here's the rumor, and it really should be reported as a rumor. The Golden Joystick Awards did not respond to requests for comment about banning political comments during the ceremony, and the Game Awards did not respond to requests for comment about whether they would also be banned at its 2023 event next month. The Golden Joystick Awards may have already happened. This is coming from Kotaku, which I guess Kotaku is still around, and their headline here is Starfield was ghosted at the 2023 awards. I think fairly so. Though I don't think there's a lot of people arguing that it should have been given any award. But I imagine ZeniMax and Microsoft is not happy about that. But it is also a great example of just, hey, if you want to talk about something, you can make a headline that's not particularly journalistically honest by saying you didn't get a response about a question, even though there really is no news to report there. Like, at a certain level, you kind of have to respect the true no comment where they don't respond at all, and not go ahead and put out a headline you were planning on putting out regardless of what the response was. But yeah, it's still an issue. Here we have the Steam Decks refurbished, and you can see they're all out of stock, and it seems to me like at best case scenario you're seeing a few 512s in stock every now and then, but getting down to a refurbished 64 gigabyte LCD first generation Steam Deck seems like you would have to be very, very lucky to get that, and arguably the price is not that right either. But as the prices go down for memory, it might be very much worth it to buy a 64 gigabyte and then immediately put in a terabyte or 2 terabytes for less money than the difference is here. But you get also slightly better screens with the 512. You get the laser etched glass with the 512, I believe, and so there's a slight difference there. Of course, the real argument right now is to buy the OLED version. Just that, obviously, buy one version of the OLED version. One thing I did see, as there was a lot of hype and a lot of people talking about the new OLED version, is you still have this D-pad that arguably it would be nice if you could switch this out to an 8-way directional. Most people are fine with the D-pad, but I saw someone playing Contra and tilting back and forth trying to get the diagonal shots in Contra and really having not a great amount of success. More success with the OLED version versus the original Steam Deck, but yeah, a 8-way diagonal shooter game like Contra, one of those older games, very well may not do well with the D-pad. But overall, it seemed like the person wasn't happy with the slightly grippier analog sticks in the OLED version and slightly better buttons. The buttons that are inset here feel a little bit better, he said, in the OLED version, but you really are picking at nits at that point too. It's very small changes. And so that brings us to the main news, and we've got a bit of a weirdness here. The extension seems to not be working for some reason. I don't know why. It says log in, but I'm already logged in. The charts in particular are seemingly the same, and yet my map, my chart gathering the data doesn't seem to be the same. I don't know what may have happened there. Overall, it might just be a case. I mean, well, let's just look at this. You sort this by 24-hour peak, and by the time you get to Team Fortress 2, there is only 77,000 players, and this is not in the order that it should be at all. I'm trying to get the highest 24-hour peak here, and the numbers are not in the right order in the chart. The numbers are going up and going down, but noticeably a lot of them are well below 100,000, so we may just be seeing significantly fewer players, which would explain why you have this like drop off lower and lower. And I am willing to buy that the finals playtest just was removed from Steam as a playtest, and that's why we're not having any extra data here overall. Apex Legends seeing a far drop. Naraka Blade Point staying consistent. A little bit of Call of Duty bump, a little bit of Baldur's Gate 3 bump, and then a little bit of a drop of GTA 5. But yeah, having the minimum of 100,000 players has caused a lot of these games down here to fall down very low, whereas also PUBG has skyrocketed and I guess stayed high up above 450,000. So I still need to find some extra time to adjust my chart to show more games. Like, this is not very helpful as a trending chart to only follow 4 or 5 games. And this list here is only as helpful as I think it is in order, but I'm not certain. We still are not seeing anything big on Steam. I imagine either right on Black Friday or maybe even a few days after Black Friday we'll get a fall sale. The only real major difference here is the Steam Deck OLED coming out November 16th, and honestly, if you want it, you should just order it. If you want it to have any chance of coming out before Christmas and being delivered, you should just order it. Again, Video Games Chronicle didn't work. Everything right now is the way I have the multiple plugins working, has all of the tabs going backwards. So I'm starting at the far right. When I hit my middle mouse button to close a page, it goes to the next tab on the left. And everything is in order this way, which the fact that everything's in order without really any hiccup is actually surprising. NeoWiz has acquired a 21% stake in a company called Blank. This is from Komatsu. We don't really have a lot of Komatsu articles either. It was just a slow weekend, I guess, overall, which is probably true for most weekends going forward, and probably should be true for all weekends. A game called Trinity Fusion launches December 15th. Let's see, now when I click on this, I have changed the macro, so it does bring me up to that page, but noticeably it is making a new tab far at the left, which might just be the compromise there. So then I have to go all the way back to the right, which is not too big of a deal. It's not exactly how I'd like it to work, but I don't think there is a consistent way I'd want it to work. We talked about the Nintendo Indie World Showcase set for November 14th. Tekken 8 adding a newcomer arena. Persona 5 Tacticia has yet another trailer. Still trying to promote that game as much as they are, and I guess it's good on Atlus for trying. Certainly, there's a lot of other games that wouldn't put that much advertisement into it. Although this might very well be a case where Atlus is really blowing the budget for Persona 5 Tacticia as a spin-off Persona game, to the point where the developers of Persona may never be able to gain enough profits to get any kind of bonus off of the game, because there's just way too much advertisement. It's a delicate balance that nobody really knows whether it will work or not. It's a gamble as far as how much advertisement is enough and versus how much advertisement is too much. This week's Japanese game releases are Persona 5 Tacticia, Super Mario RPG, and more. I almost certainly would assume that Super Mario RPG is going to sell like hotcakes. The Hogwarts Legacy Switch version is launching worldwide also, although it probably won't be particularly great as a Switch port. But yeah. I definitely would like to go and play Super Mario RPG on the Switch, but it definitely would be a big time commitment, and I just don't have the extra time. Maybe we're seeing a slightly larger amount of digital-only releases this week too. We may be getting back into a habit of seeing more releases overall. It does feel like there's 2 or 3 extra games that were released this week. This is interesting. I don't feel like this was a thing before, but maybe this has been here the whole time, where Komatsu has a coupon and they're linking to a Play Asia links and affiliated links with a coupon code, which, fair enough. Komatsu is run by one person. That was one of the things I heard a podcaster say, I don't know who, that it might have been Linus Tech Tips, or Linus from Linus Tech Tips, that was saying it. But he was saying that that The Escapist, as it was before it basically imploded a couple of days ago, was probably needing to have a lot of editors and writers and just a lot of staff, and honestly, it's kind of not the case. Komatsu really shows the example of a website that I'm fairly certain is run by exactly one person, and he just puts out press releases. He does a good job on it, and he deserves any ad revenue or affiliate links really from that he can get, if not straight up better support through things like Patreon or something like that. I don't know if Komatsu really has a Patreon. The way The Escapist was run is very much an old school way of thinking. They have a whole team of writers and editors, and it's just not the way that you really need to do video game journalism, because inherently, and I have a bit of a bias here, but I would say inherently, I think most people don't want opinionated editorials around their video game news. They just want to know when the game is coming out. They want to know if there's a new trailer. They just want to get hyped about the games. They don't want a deep opinionated article about why Super Mario RPG is now too woke or not woke enough, which is what you get a lot of times from Kotaku, or you get at least a little bit of that where it's irritating. And yeah, it's just not something you need. Yes, there should be a Jason Schreier type person. There should be more people like that that really do deep editorial researches, or maybe look backs and interviews and things like that. But for the most part, you need one editor, and that's it for a video game website. Komatsu proves that, whereas the Escapists just had way too many people writing articles, and their solution to having too many people writing articles was not to reduce the number of articles and get rid of the garbage that seemingly nobody was reading, particularly the written articles versus zero punctuation, which is what most people were looking at from the Escapists still. But yeah, just getting rid of most of those articles and would have been the solution, not hiring one editor to make hundreds of AI generated articles and edit them down to be factually accurate so they don't get sued, which was what Gamer's solution to the Escapists was. Ad revenue is not really that big on websites that you can't just continuously flood a website with news things and try and get more ad revenue that way, particularly if you're talking about games nobody cares about. Moving on, cassette futurist action game RPG Robots at Midnight has been announced for Xbox Series and PC. Let's see if we've got this on the fall list already. We do. And so if I close the tab, it does bring me back to where it was. So it does jump me all the way from the left to the right. Now it's going to quickly bring us to the GameDeveloper.com articles, most of which we've talked about. Apparently a longtime Blizzard art director, Sam Dieter, departs the studio. During his time at Blizzard, Dieter drew art for nearly all the studio's games and famously created the Pandarian race for the World of Warcraft series. Which, yeah. Again, you're going to have to think of something here with such a big amount of hair to try to have a professional photo here and be in a t-shirt. At the very least, I would say, hey, put the hair back. Same thing I would say for a female person is don't go over the shoulder when taking a photograph with hair. Put it back. You can have long hair, but you don't need to emphasize exactly how long the hair is. But yeah, put it back. Make sure it's not covering up the face as much as possible. This is yet another story where you have an Activision Blizzard employee still leaving Activision Blizzard, so being acquired clearly isn't enough for some people. Although maybe he was asked to leave too. But it does definitely feel like you're losing talent here. And whatever Activision Blizzard under Microsoft turns out to be, it will just be a different thing from what it was before the acquisition, from what it was back in the heyday of Activision and Blizzard being hugely successful companies that people actually liked. Let's see. Baldur's Gate 3 and Tears of the Kingdom headline the Game Award nominees. Remedy is rebooting the freemium project codenamed Vanguard due to market risks. We already basically talked about that, although really don't know that much. And then we talked about this. Stray Gods, Gods of War Ragnarok composers are among the 2024 Grammy nominations. So, are they nominated for their work in video games, or are they nominated for their work somewhere else? And under what category are these nominations? They don't really have this laid out in an easy way to find out those answers. Best score in visual media was the last time something won in 2014, so talking a long time, like 8 years. And it definitely would be my assumption that there are just sometimes when the Grammys want a boost, and so they start nominating video game composers as a way of getting some attention, but most years the judges don't even consider it. It definitely doesn't feel like every year the Grammys are nominating video game composers, even for like special categories. Probably should, but it also gets back down to the question of how prestigious are the Grammys really. And it's kind of hard to separate, in my mind, the music in a video game with the action sequence that's usually happening when the music is playing too. And so when you start to separate and say, we just want to give an award to the musical composer here, it's questionable whether the music can stand on its own or was ever even designed to stand on its own. Very little music these days really is ingested as a standalone piece where you're listening to an MP3 or a CD or an album. It's almost always you're seeing it as a background to a movie or a TV sequence or a video game sequence, where you're also seeing visuals and actions, and very often the music is being cut and changed to fit that specific scene. And then there is also the unique nature of a lot of video game music in that it needs to be fairly boring and repetitive so that you can play it over and over again while you're spending 60 hours playing a game, compared to listening to an album, which would only take you an hour or two. And then apparently Blizzard may be ready to annualize World of Warcraft expansions, which I kind of felt like it already did that, but apparently not. And then the fall list cleanup seems to not have run again, but so we'll just assumingly jump to all the new games on Steam, which, let's see, this one says March 28th of 2023, so I suspect this is a fall list game. So I bet the fall list did run, it just put the tabs in the wrong place, which is fine. We'll just go through these ones that are already tagged on the fall list and consider whether they should stay on the fall list or whether they should leave. This one should leave just because it's not relevant enough. Nobody reviewed it. It doesn't have 30 reviews. Arguably anything from March could probably be dismissed, but I'll give this some more time because I kind of like the art style. Whereas here we have a VR skee ball, and while I would like a VR skee ball game, well, this weirdly isn't VR. I was wrong about that. Sorry. It's doing more for skee ball than what you normally would have, but it still kind of feels asset flippy, and it doesn't matter. It came out in 2021 and it's irrelevant, so it should leave. We can dismiss things that are mixed just based on my own opinion, so I'll move that from the fall list too if I don't double click on it. Just wait a second, make sure I actually got it removed that time. I have the Owl. I think this is a VR game. Yes, it is. Free to play. But it's in VR, so you know what I should do is just add it to the library now and then remove it from the fall list. Yep. That's the easiest thing to do there. I don't mind really having a collection of VR games that I'll probably never play if they're free. This, I guess I'll give some more time to. I'll start to be a lot more critical as far as games in 2024. Once I start to see the 2023, which is mostly what I'm looking for. I'm not looking to see if it's been exactly 6 months or something like that. I'm just saying if this game was released before 2023, it's time to probably say no to it if it's not positively reviewed. This is Formula 1 2023, and it's positively reviewed, so I'll put it on there. Although in all fairness, if I had on my wish list a Formula 1 or F1 2022, it almost certainly would be time to remove that from the wish list and not buy that. Particularly these EA games. It doesn't make a lot of sense to buy anything in the newest year and probably play it very quickly, because who knows, these games might be removed from sale or unplayable after a year. Of course, we do then also run into a manager game here, F1 Manager 2023, which, while it is very positive, I'm going to say no, because I don't want to play a manager game. And in February of 2023 is probably not quite enough time. So I suspect what happened here, now that we're seeing a new list, is this is the point where we start to look at all the new games. Yep. This is the first game that wasn't on the fall list. So for the most part, my macro is perfect. I just need to see if I can move where I put that one interstitial page poster to say when the fall list starts and when all the new games on Steam start. I'll give this game a chance. And then I think I've got it as good as I'm ever going to get it. This one's already on the fall list. So now we're just going to try and burn through this fairly quickly. And even though I put a long pause in the middle of the stream, I still feel like I might be able to end fairly quickly today. And then I'll have to edit it out. I just really did do a terrible job. This game looks terrible. What's weird here too is that the developer is called Gantz Game, and the only thing I've ever seen named Gantz was an anime that looks nothing like this. I don't think it stands for anything. But yeah, I really did a terrible job there. I could have paused the recording in the middle of the phone call. I could have just swapped my phone to the other hand and multitasked, and then I could have started playback on YouTube on Yu-Gi-Oh! To show some games playing. Do I want to do anything with this horror game? Yeah, I'll give it a chance, but it's probably nothing. Nothing here. I did watch a speedrun of, what was it, Silent Hill Homecoming, Silent Hill Shattered Memories, and Silent Hill 2, just to try to get a better understanding of what the games were. And yeah, Shattered Memories is kind of like a remake, as they explained it, of the first game, and it is very different looking and than the first Silent Hill 2, which everybody's really obsessed with. There's just no pyramid head, there's not as much rust. Overall, of the three games, they all seemed like they needed full-on reboots, and hopefully we'll get full-on reboots. Meanwhile, right now I'm looking at an adult game called Tentacle Temptation. It looks to me like it's a maze-solving game with some slight visual novel things. Weirdly, it's tagged as a hidden object game, and I would say that doesn't seem to be what it is. It's $1.59. It's English and Spanish Latin America, and yeah, most of the screenshots are showing the maze game. There's only one adult screenshot, and weirdly it's blurred too, so I guess I guess technically you don't need a blur on a blur. But yeah, the vast majority of the game seems almost like a Pac-Man maze runner type game or something. regardless, not high quality. Let's see, Mercenary Warriors doesn't look like anything. Now I'm running into the problem though where I'm not moving to the left with the middle mouse button. It's moving me to the right. So I'm just ending up back on the hospital horror game. Here we have what looks like it's normally would be an adult game that's just been censored. Which, yeah, I don't know who would really buy that unless you just have somewhat lenient parents, but not that lenient parents. That it'd still be a waste of money even at that point. Art of Golf. Looks like it's a Gorillas clone style game, or maybe a little bit of an Angry Bird style game. Cody's Nightmare looks like it might be something. Buzzed might be something. It's almost certainly nothing. Soko Chess. The concept of maybe mixing chess and Sokoban might be interesting, but the way it's depicted here as a single solid color background style puzzle game is not quite good enough. Demon Heart, the Cursed Trail, looks like it's a vampire demon otome visual novel. We'll give that a chance, although questionable whether I should even bother to make YouTube shorts around those type of games or not. Yep. I've gotten more feedback than ever from the YouTube shorts, but still not really any high levels to know what kind of games people actually would react to or care about. It very much is one person will comment and say, I'm so interested in this game, which is way more than I usually get as far as comments, but it's not large numbers of people or conversations. State Agent Simulator doesn't look particularly good either. Blazing Sails might be an interesting pirate game, so I'll give it a chance. Hold the Door is some kind of tower defense game. Here we have a Spirit Tea game, which is already on the fall list. Yep. Dance Hero More Jiggle. Looks like it's a asset flip dancing joke of a game. I wouldn't call it a joke game per se, but definitely doesn't look like it's a consistent visuals. This doesn't look like anything of interest either. Under a New Sun. Looks like it is a survival game. You do have this weird situation where any survival game could be an asset flip game with no polish on it, or it could be the next great survival game because they're so close to each other. So I'll have to give it a chance if it looks even decent. I won't give this game a chance. Nor this game. Is this from the same developer? This one's Wolf's Moon Studios. Looks like an RPG 8-bit game of no interest. And then next we have Battle Band's Rock and Roll Deck Builder. This is probably nothing, but I'm a sucker for card games, so I'll give it a chance. Minigame Madness. Looks like nothing of interest. 3D Puzzle and Farming 2. Looks like nothing. Let's see, I guess this is nothing too. 3D puzzle kingdom in the dark. The description and title of 3D puzzle is the problem here. You might make a game that is just a big open world 3D puzzle like The Witness, but just to have a generic name like 3D puzzle doesn't inspire a lot of artistic polish. It doesn't make me think there's a deep, well thought out world. Let's Be a Mouse is another great example of just too simplistic of a title. Emu War. Looks like it's a asset flip troll joke game too. See the Brave Edian Adventure. Disco Simulator. Nothing here. Nothing here. Nothing of interest there. Here we have another adult game. This one's called Phantom Thief Sylphy, Sylphy 2, The Collector. This looks to me like it's mostly an RPG Maker game with a big bodacious lady. Giant boobs, giant hips, fairly large, big and beautiful. White lady with auburn hair, I would guess is what you describe it, in glasses. She seems to use her legs to choke out at least one character in one scene. If you're into that fetish, I could see the art style being appealing, but the actual game looks pretty terrible. And they want $8.49. It's English only. If you get the bundle for both the first and the second game, it's $13.86. It's English in interface and subtitles, not full audio. Then we have the next adult game, which is a 3D CGI game called The Bunker, which looks like it's a blonde-haired white girl with, for a CGI depiction, I'd say I'd describe it more like torpedo boobs and giant, but more anatomically inaccurate. Really, it's just way too big. Even the guy looks way too big to be realistic. So yeah, it's not particularly good 3D CGI. It seems like there's a guy and a girl and that's it, and they're stuck in a ugly bunker. They're charging $3.49 for this with English in the interface only, no subtitles at all in this case. And apparently the guy and girl might be brother and sister is one of the warnings there, which I don't think that is too much of a turn-off for most people, but it's worth mentioning. Just a poor quality 3D CGI adult game. Is there enough of a shoot 'em up game here to give it a chance? Yeah, I'll give this one a chance. I don't tend to give shoot 'em up games much of a chance, and it's not like there's a lot of them. Here we have another adult game, I think, yeah, it is, called Witch Academy. It's 3D CGI characters. It feels like it's pretty much just a simulator. You're posing ladies in different positions and in a kind of ugly looking cave. It looks like there might be a sigil on the floor, or not really even a sigil, it's just kind of a tiled circle floor. They want $12.74 for this, and they claim to support 11 languages with Japanese full audio, which I question. It's possible that this simulator might have a little bit more options than your average simulator, but the visuals look terrible. And simulator games, adult simulator games in general, just are not really games as much as they are click a button and start an animation programs. I just don't know if anybody really wants that. That you would want no story and no reason for why a animation might change. Next we have another adult game called Dungeon Core Master. This is a 2D colorful anime style game. It looks like you've got a cat girl and elf girl. Seems to be that that it's a visual novel with 3 adventurers in a fantasy world. It feels like it kind of has a little bit more visual polish than you would expect. It's selling very cheaply for $3.19, but weirdly it's only English for the interface and subtitles. So I imagine it's a fairly short game with 3 characters. But it does kind of feel like they spent maybe more of their budget on the animation and having every scene potentially be drawn nicely and connected visually in a color palette and theme wise. And arguably maybe it's a case where by not throwing in a simplistic gameplay mechanic, they could just focus on a standard visual novel experience without wasting time on a match 2 card game or something like that. Tau Cubis. Baker Street Breakouts. Doesn't look interesting. Here we have what looks like it might be a Korean game called To the Star, but it doesn't support English, so we can't do anything with it. Dreamtown Island doesn't look like anything. At a certain level, I kind of wish I could just close these games without turning off the blur. That would save me some mouse movements, but then I'm not really showing the game off, am I? Because I want to have at least a small possibility that somebody would comment and say, hey, you passed by a game and I feel like you should have looked at it a little bit longer. The CD2 Trapmaster is probably not the best title ever. I wonder if there had been a CD1. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything labeled CD1. That's a weird name. Oh, do I want to make a short around this? Just because of the title, I almost want to say no, but I'm going to be generous and say yes. Of course, I'm not going to say yes to something called The Egg. Here we have another adult game called Waifu vs. Zombies. This is one of those cases where there's one gameplay mechanic here where you have an asset flipped 3D CGI girl with guns and weapons, and I can just show it off here, and then none of the screenshots are really showing any adult content at all, so I wouldn't be surprised if there actually isn't any and that this is just trying to trick people. But yeah, as the parts that they are showing here, even though there's guns and bows and arrows, there's really not a game here that I think I'd want to play. Let's see if I scroll down anymore. The mature content does say there is some adult stuff in it. It also says it's English with full audio and subtitles. I should probably always mention subtitles too. But yeah, I wouldn't have a lot of faith in a game that's in the adult section but is unwilling to show even one screenshot of the adult content. This game Echoes doesn't look like anything. Missing stars. Probably would say no to this, but I'll give it a chance. There is this increasing chance, though, that I'm just going to make more and more YouTube shorts around visual novels. Which, in all fairness, that may be the only advertisement a lot of visual novels ever get at all in the world, so it's not terrible to highlight something and see if people might react to it. There is, I guess, a distant future possibility where there's just way too many visual novels being made and we are running out of games that have interactive content. Or very few games actually have interactive gameplay mechanics, but that would probably take decades and almost certainly never really happen. Here we have another adult game called Orgasm Simulator 3, which is a 3D CGI. Two ladies and a guy. It seems like kind of a simulator, maybe with even a few mini games. The characters look pretty good. It's rated very positively with 92% of 84 user reviews. It's selling for $6.09. It says it has English full audio and subtitles while supporting 30 other languages in the interface. So yeah, much higher quality, I'd say, than some of the other games we've seen today. I would say there is perhaps in the 3D CGI models a kind of awkward skinniness to some of the characters, maybe a little too skinny, but not terrible. It's definitely not getting to the point where they are just skin and bones. Well, it might be getting a little too close for your own personal desires to that. Usually they tend to be a little bit more plump than that. This Project I game is probably nothing, but I'll give it a chance. It's very possibly a free yeah, it's just a free vertical slice of a game. But I don't think there's anything really wrong with making a YouTube short on that. It's a free game. I potentially could just add it to the library, but I'll wait until we see if there's anything here. Now this too looks like this might be an adult game, but it's not in the adult section, but it is tagged not safe for work. Every screenshot here is not really emphasizing these female characters, which really it's just one model flipped over, it looks like. So I'd assume what's going on here is that this is really just an asset flip game and not that good. Although you look at this screenshot and this is basically what Silent Hill Shattered Memories felt like. It's just a very foggy 3D asset flipped world, and that very possibly was that, where you're just wandering around the same streets, the same hallways over and over again. At least in the speedrunner's case. Maybe in a regular gameplay you have more that you experience. I would say though that Silent Hill 2 seemed to have a lot more interaction, and Silent Hill Homecoming seemed to have a lot more interaction with people and fighting the bosses. Although the whole game series does still feel kind of crazy. It's not until we get to way past here that we start to see screenshots of the characters, and yep, this definitely just feels like one of those zombie first-person shooter asset flips where they've just thrown in some 3D models of ladies to try and grab your attention. This is also way too many screenshots compared to any other game, which I guess that does highlight that you can basically put as many screenshots as you want in a game on a Steam page, but most people tend not to have a massive long list of them. But yeah, that's going to be a no. We can go ahead and say no to this game too. And we've got a Boom Blast. And Spookier Market. Nope, to that. Now the Soul of Butterflies Incubation with this hand-drawn animation looks interesting. I'm not sure if this is... kind of feels like a point-and-click adventure game, but it's more being labeled as a hidden object game. Yeah, well, up here it says point-and-click adventure, but they've chosen hidden object as the tag. And that may be a problem on Steam in general, is that you may get more views if you label your game as a hidden object game than as a point-and-click adventure game, instead of accurately describing your game as a point-and-click. I would not call this a hidden object game from the looks of it. And almost certainly there is a tag that says point-and-click, and maybe they did put point-and-click up, and the YouTube web, the Steam's web algorithm puts point-and-click way down lower. Let's see, yeah, point-click is down here, and it may be that these are just in the order of what games get the most use of these tags, which would be a really silly thing to do, because then almost everything would come up with something like hidden object. And puzzle platformer here doesn't really make a lot of sense. You can see on these tags in general, there's far too many tags being used, and there's definitely an argument to limiting how many tags a game can be tagged as, particularly when it's the publisher putting these tags in, even though they say these are user-defined tags. It really is not the case, originally at least. Like, if we have 5 user reviews, I doubt any of those 5 people actually added tags to the game. Moving on, we've got a game called Dragon Wings, which doesn't look like anything. Here we have something called Portable Ops, which almost certainly is going for name confusion around some Modern Warfare Portable Ops game. This is definitely not the Portable Ops you would be thinking of if you said Portable Ops. We have something called Defense Protocol, which looks like it's a tower defense game. Top down, doesn't look terrible, but doesn't look like there's a lot going on either for a tower defense game. Here we have an RPG Maker game called Lost Day, which I think I can ignore and dismiss fairly easily. Here we have yet another adult game called Countess in Crimson, which is 3D CGI models, but weirdly the camera is fairly pulled back from the 3D models, and there's a lot of like overworld map navigating that it feels like it probably is a visual novel, but it might be a case where you have to select the location you're going to on the map. There's a nun here covered in tattoos and piercing, which is quite the fetish. There's a lady in white latex. There's a big black tentacle monster in one scene. Feels like there's about 6 ladies, and it's possibly all girl on girl. Maybe there's a guy in there, but I'm not seeing him. Maybe you play as a guy. That's very possible. Countess in Crimson is selling for $7.99. It supports 6 languages, it says: English, French, Spain, Spanish, Polish, Chinese. In the interface and subtitles way, no voice acting. it's interesting, I would say, in that you have one character who seems to be dressed fairly normally, and then several other characters that all have very unique outfits. Like, it's definitely going for more of that high fashion craziness, which you just don't really get a lot of that in the 3D CGI realistic, more Western adult games. Noticeably, it's worth pointing out that this game is also 84% positive of 386 user reviews. So I'd have to assume that this game was on early access for a fairly long amount of time. Either that, or it is just being found and loved by its audience of at least 386 people willing to review it, which multiply that potentially by 100 people, and that might give you a good guesstimate on how many people are actually playing it on Steam. Remember, Steam has also introduced the ability to hide games, or is going to introduce the ability to hide games, so we may see the number of views and the number of games being played from the adult section skyrocket. I'll give this Siege of Dungeon a chance. The Lost Ashford Ring looks like it's just a hidden object game. I'm gonna say no to that. Although I could see myself making an exception for that game had I spent more thought on it, because it was a hidden object game not from the big publishers like Big Fish Games that tend to put out a new hidden object game once a week or so on Steam. They've got their pacing down pretty good, Big Fish Games. I can't really claim that they're flooding Steam with hidden object games. They are just trickling in a large amount of them in a very consistent, paced out way, which is what I'd like to see. It's not have 5 games on one day and then no games for a week. Ideally have 1 game per week. Here we have another adult game called Gay Sex Adventures Episode 1. Yeah. If you flipped it the other way and said Straight Sex Adventures Episode 1, you'd never see a game by that name. Or if you even went Lesbian Sex Adventures Episode 1, you would never see a game by that description, likely, because it's just not a good, informative title. And again, when it's guy on guy, it feels like the people that make these games are just trying to make it be as bizarre and as trolly as possible. You have guys in a bathroom making out, and you just kind of don't see that in any of the other adult games. In a bathroom in a club, guys with tattoos and beards and giant members. They're selling this for $3.99, English only. And it just doesn't feel like there's a lot of effort put into it. Next, we have a 3D CGI adult game called Adverse Effects, which a lot of these screenshots are actually zooming in. Like, one of them zoomed in on a plate of spaghetti for no reason. Like, the screenshots aren't really showing the ladies fully featured in the screenshots, and none of the screenshots have nudity in them. Interesting. Yeah, somebody was having trouble sleeping is the concept. They take sleeping pills which have adverse effects, which that's a real thing. Some people do take sleeping pills, and then all of a sudden it creates people having sexomnia, where they're trying to have sex with people while they're half asleep, people that they very possibly shouldn't be trying to have sex with. But that's just all the text. The screenshot's really not promising a lot. $4.99 is Adverse Effects. It's an interesting title, certainly. It's English interface only. It says it has 590 full HD renders with 55 plus full HD animations and 7,000 lines of script with 30,000 words, which is fairly low amount of scripted words. The doctor is female, the main protagonist is female, and then there's a male character not being mentioned that I see in the screenshots, I think. And yeah, definitely feels like it would be a shorter, smaller experience as a visual novel. Next we have a game called Western Redemption, which almost has enough polish for me to give it a chance. Yeah, let's give it a chance. I'm running out of emotional energy to make decisions, but the good news is I also only have like 5 more games to talk about, so I got lucky because it was the weekend and there just wasn't that much news to talk about and that many new games to talk about. Here we have HH Games, one of the big publishers of hidden object games, putting out a new hidden object game. Yeah, I got really lucky today, despite my own mistakes. Here we have some kind of prototype game. I'll give it a chance, although in all fairness, should I give prototype games YouTube Shorts views? Probably not. Sujimon? I don't know what that would mean. Some kind of monster RPG maker game. Yeah, on second thought, let's not put prototype games on the YouTube Shorts. Let's wait until a game actually comes out. If a game actually does come out. And here we have a bullet hell shooter game. It's got a unique art style. Probably would normally say no, but I'll give it a chance. Game Time Glizzies. Whatever that's supposed to be. That's gonna be a no. Then we have a game called Tome of Fates, which that's gonna be a no. And then we've got Trinity Fusion, which is already on the fall list. Wait, no, that was one that I just added to the fall list to make a YouTube short on it. Well, regardless, I'll unclose that tab. That's going to be it for the show. Hopefully Wednesday will be better. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's a link down below. Thank you for watching. Have